When Barron Trump stepped into an upscale restaurant, he had no idea his MAGA hat would ignite a public confrontation that would ripple across the city. What unfolded next not only caught the manager off guard, but also became the talk of Los Angeles. It was one of those bright, breezy afternoons in LA, the kind that invites you to take your time and soak in the day. Barron, now a teenager, had spent his morning engrossed in books and decided to treat himself to lunch at La Terraza. This wasn't just any restaurant, it was a hotspot for the elite, the kind of place where the air buzzed with quiet conversations between celebrities, executives, and social media influencers. Barron had dined there before, always appreciating the tranquil vibe and top-tier service. When he entered, his height and demeanor made him noticeable, but it was the unmistakable red MAGA hat on his head that truly caught attention. He wore it effortlessly, not as a statement, but simply as part of who he was. The hostess, a well-dressed woman with a professional yet warm air, guided him to a cozy table in the corner. The lunch crowd was light, just a handful of patrons sipping wine and chatting in low voices. Barron opened the menu, scanning for his usual order, calm and composed. At first, he didn't register the reactions around him, the sideways glances, the man at the neighboring table whispering to his companion, or the staff murmuring near the bar. Then the manager appeared. A man in his 40s, dressed sharply, approached with purpose, his voice cutting through the hum of the room. "Excuse me," he said, loud enough for others to hear. His expression was stern. "We have a policy against political attire here. I'm going to have to ask you to take off the hat." Barron looked up, startled but unflinching. He slowly removed his earbuds and placed them beside his menu. "I wasn't aware of any policy like that," he replied evenly, his tone polite yet unwavering. "It's part of our policy," the manager said firmly, gesturing vaguely toward the front door. "We aim to keep this space welcoming for everyone." Barron tilted his head, considering his next move. He scanned the room. Some patrons tried to act oblivious, while others openly watched the interaction unfold. "I'm not here to cause any issues," he said evenly. "I just came to have lunch." His voice was calm, measured. The manager's expression hardened. "You'll need to remove the hat, or I'll have to ask you to leave." Barron hesitated, his face giving nothing away. After a beat, he pushed his chair back and stood, his movements deliberate. "If that's how it is," he said, his tone steady, "then I'll go." The restaurant fell silent, tension hanging in the air as Barron gathered his belongings. Leaving his untouched glass of water on the table, he walked out without another word. The soft click of the closing door barely broke the uneasy stillness inside. Outside, Barron stopped on the sidewalk, the warm California breeze brushing his face. He adjusted his hat slightly, as if solidifying his decision to keep it on, and took a deep breath. He wasn't angry, maybe a little frustrated, but mostly he felt let down. He'd always believed in meeting conflict with respect and understanding, and this felt like a betrayal of that value. Inside the restaurant, quiet whispers rippled through the space. A server leaned toward the manager and asked, "Are you sure that was the right call? You know who that was, right?" The manager dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. "We can't make exceptions," he replied. "If we do, we send the wrong signal. This is my establishment, and I'll run it my way." A few blocks away, Barron arrived at a small park and settled onto an empty bench. Pulling out his phone, he began typing a message to his mother, explaining what had happened. Then, he sent a quick text to a few close friends. He wasn't seeking pity, just perspective. Had he overreacted? Was the manager right? The replies came in quickly. "That's ridiculous," one friend wrote. "They were out of line." Another chimed in, "You handled it better than I ever could." As Barron read through the messages, an idea started forming. He wasn't interested in escalating the situation or seeking revenge. Instead, he saw a chance to turn this into something positive, something impactful. If the restaurant wanted to avoid political controversy, why not promote unity and mutual respect instead? Barron rose from his seat, resolve lighting up his expression. He began dialing numbers, his voice steady and purposeful. "Hey, I need your help with something," he said to the first person, the start of many conversations that would set his plan in motion. Back at La Terraza, tension hung in the air. News of the incident had started spreading like wildfire on social media as other patrons shared their versions online. "They threw Barron Trump out just for wearing a hat," one post read, paired with a grainy photo of the moment. Another post added, "Freedom of expression." Apparently not at La Terraza. The manager, scrolling through his phone at the bar, could feel his stomach tighten. The comment threads were already swelling, and not all the feedback was in his favor. "Let them talk," he muttered under his breath, trying to dismiss the creeping sense of regret. But deep down, he could feel the situation slipping further out of control. By the time Barron arrived home, the story had already gained traction online. A few local influencers had picked it up, their posts ranging from supportive to divisive. Barron skimmed through the updates, but didn't linger. He had no intention of fanning the flames of controversy. Instead, his mind was set on finding a way to turn the negativity into something constructive. Sitting at his desk, Barron opened a small leather notebook and began jotting down ideas. He reflected on the interactions of the day, not just with the manager, but also with the onlookers, the silent judgments, the inquisitive gazes. What could he do to inspire dialogue rather than deepen division? He wanted to challenge the polarization, but in a meaningful and approachable way. Then, almost suddenly, an idea clicked. A community fundraiser. Not just any event, but one with a clear message of inclusion and support. He envisioned a gathering aimed at assisting underprivileged groups, particularly by fostering safe spaces for open discussions and understanding. He picked up his phone. "Hi, this is Barron Trump. I'm looking for advice on organizing a charity event. It's urgent. Could we meet tomorrow?" The person on the other line hesitated, but then quickly agreed. As the evening wore on, Barron's vision began to take form. He sketched out plans for the fundraiser, deciding to hold it right outside La Terraza. The location, he thought, would symbolize the possibility of turning conflict into connection. A trusted friend offered to assist with logistics, and soon enough, the preparations were underway. Meanwhile, the restaurant found itself at the center of a growing storm. The manager's actions were no longer confined to the walls of La Terraza. They had become a heated public discussion. News outlets quickly picked up the story, sharing eyewitness accounts and sparking debate. Some reports portrayed Barron as a victim of prejudice, while others supported the restaurant's right to uphold its rules. The restaurant's social media pages were inundated with reactions. While some commenters applauded the manager for sticking to his principles, others demanded a boycott, accusing the restaurant of hypocrisy. One user remarked, "So much for neutrality. Expelling someone isn't neutral, it's taking a side." The atmosphere at La Terraza grew tense. Regular patrons started cancelling reservations, and the once busy eatery became eerily quiet. The manager, who initially stood firm in his decision, began to question himself. He tried to convince himself the storm would pass, but doubts lingered. Meanwhile, Barron was preparing for the days ahead. He realized the incident couldn't be undone, but he hoped a new approach could shift the narrative toward something positive. The world didn't need more heated arguments. It needed opportunities to connect, even in unexpected ways. The next morning, La Terrace's normally quiet block was a hive of activity. Volunteers unloaded trucks filled with supplies, setting up tables, banners, and a modest stage. Barron directed the efforts, standing in the middle of the commotion. A large banner above the stage declared, "United we stand, building bridges, not walls." Barron had reached out to organizations focusing on community outreach, youth mentorship, and open dialogue. The event wasn't just about fundraising, it was about fostering a sense of togetherness among people from all walks of life. Food trucks, live music, and charity booths lined the street, turning a place of conflict into a hub of community celebration. By midday, a diverse crowd gathered. Families, young professionals, activists, and even faces familiar from social media. Barron took the microphone, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Yesterday, I was asked to leave this restaurant because of a hat," he began. "That's okay. I respect their rules, even if I don't agree. But what hit me wasn't just being turned away. It was the bigger picture." He paused, letting the moment sink in. We've become so quick to judge, so eager to divide, so afraid to have real conversations. That's not who we are. We can do better. The audience broke into applause, but Barron wasn't finished. "This isn't about me or them," he continued. "It's about us, about finding ways to listen, to understand, and to come together. The money we raise today will fund programs that foster dialogue and inclusion. Thank you for showing that unity is stronger than division." The crowd erupted in cheers as Barron stepped down, personally thanking attendees and shaking hands. His calm and heartfelt message resonated with many who had come out of curiosity, but left feeling inspired. Meanwhile, inside La Terraza, the atmosphere remained starkly different. The manager stood by the window, silently observing the scene unfolding outside. He hadn't anticipated Barron's reaction, and now it left him feeling uneasy. A few of his employees had wandered out to join the fundraiser, drawn by the upbeat music and the contagious sense of togetherness. One of the waiters, who had been on shift the previous day, approached the bar and spoke in a low voice. "You should step out there. Have a word with him." The manager stiffened, his tone curt. "This isn't my battle." The waiter gave a small shrug. "Maybe not, but it might just be your moment." The manager didn't respond, but his stern expression softened ever so slightly. Grabbing a glass of water, he returned to the window, watching as the gathering outside swelled in numbers. There was something about the scene, a warmth, an energy, that stirred something in him he hadn't allowed himself to feel before. By the afternoon, the fundraiser in front of La Terraza had become the center of attention. Social media buzzed with live streams, snapshots, and hashtags, amplifying Barron's powerful message. The event drew more than the neighborhood crowd. News crews arrived to capture the electric atmosphere and Barron's inspiring words. Inside the restaurant, however, things were starkly different. The usually bustling dining area felt unsettlingly quiet. Tables that typically required reservations weeks in advance were now empty, and the few diners present seemed distracted, their gazes often straying toward the lively activity outside, as though they were missing out on something bigger. The manager tried to focus, but the growing tension among his staff was impossible to ignore. A server cautiously approached him. "Some guests are asking about the fundraiser," she said. "They're saying it looks amazing. Maybe we should—" The manager cut her off with a glance, his jaw tight. Without a word, he turned and headed to his office, shutting the door firmly behind him. Seated at his desk, he stared at his computer screen, where a flood of emails filled his inbox. Complaints, cancelled reservations, even harsh criticisms from local media. One email caught his eye. It was from a loyal customer who had always been supportive of the restaurant. The message read, "I've always enjoyed dining at La Terrassa, but yesterday's incident was deeply upsetting. Asking someone to leave over their personal beliefs isn't the neutrality you claim to uphold. It's divisive. I hope you find a way to make this right." The words landed harder than he expected. Leaning back in his chair, he ran a hand through his hair. Had he been wrong? Was his decision truly about neutrality? Or was it something else? Something he wasn't ready to admit to himself? Outside, the fundraiser had reached its crescendo. A jazz band filled the air with lively tunes. Children giggled as they painted colorful murals, and the community buzzed with an undeniable energy that couldn't be ignored. Barron stood in the heart of the bustling event, the donation boxes brimming with contributions as the community rallied around. He moved effortlessly through the crowd, greeting people, listening to their stories, and even snapping the occasional selfie. His presence was magnetic, not flashy or self-serving, but steady and sincere. As the sun dipped lower, painting the scene with a golden glow, a murmur spread among the attendees. All eyes shifted toward the restaurant's entrance, where the manager had just stepped out. He lingered briefly at the top of the steps, nervously adjusting his tie before making his way toward Barron. Conversations hushed as people watched the two men draw closer. Barron noticed the manager approaching and offered a small, welcoming smile. He stood firm, extending his hand without hesitation. The manager paused for a moment, then grasped it. "I'd like to talk," the manager said softly, his words barely audible over the ambient noise. "Of course," Barron replied, motioning toward a quieter spot at the event's edge. The two walked away from the crowd, which observed respectfully, allowing them the space to converse. Near the edge of the gathering, where the music and chatter were faint, the manager's demeanor shifted. His usual composed confidence gave way to unease. Glancing between Barron and the crowd, he took a deep breath. "I need to start by saying I didn't handle things well yesterday," he admitted, his voice low. "I thought I was protecting my business and my team, but I realize now I acted out of fear, not fairness. I judged you, and I was wrong." Barron listened intently, his expression steady and encouraging. After a pause, he said, "It takes courage to admit that. Thank you for sharing this." The manager exhaled, as if a burden had been lifted. "Watching what you've done here today, it's been humbling. You could have lashed out, used this as a chance to criticize my business publicly, but instead you created something meaningful. Not many people would have done that." Barron's faint smile returned. "I don't think the world needs more conflict. Yesterday could have just fueled the fire, but I wanted to demonstrate that there's another way." The manager nodded slowly. "You've done that, and I'd like to support this effort. If there's any way I or the restaurant can contribute, I'd love to help." Barron paused thoughtfully before replying. "The best way to contribute is by reflecting on how we treat others. Policies are important, but they should never overshadow kindness and understanding. Maybe La Terrassa could host a community event, something that unites people instead of dividing them." The manager blinked, clearly taken aback, but soon a small smile appeared. "That's a great idea. Let's do it." They shook hands again, this time with genuine warmth. The crowd, sensing the resolution, erupted in applause, their cheers carrying a sense of hope and unity. The applause wasn't the typical polite clapping you might expect in such a setting. It was genuine, a reflection of how deeply everyone felt the importance of the occasion. As the event drew to a close, Barron stepped onto the stage once more to express his gratitude to all who had come to support the mission. He concluded his remarks with a poignant statement: "We all make mistakes. What matters is how we choose to grow from them." Today wasn't just about fundraising. It was about proving that even in disagreement, we can discover shared values. Thank you for showing that unity isn't just possible, it's essential. The audience burst into cheers, their enthusiasm lighting up the evening. As the Los Angeles sun dipped below the horizon, Barron stood with his loved ones, watching the attendees leave, their hearts carrying not just the memory of the event, but the powerful message it conveyed. This story serves as a profound reminder. Disagreements don't have to lead to division or bitterness. When we embrace grace, empathy, and proactive solutions, even life's toughest challenges can become moments of connection and personal growth.